Good morning, everybody. Circuit Court Judge and candidate for Wisconsin's 3rd District Court of Appeals, Judge Greg Gill, is my very special guest today, Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. Special thank you to Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald for being on yesterday for our weekly Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy show. Though I'm sure Fitzy's probably not in a super positive mood this morning after his team Michigan lost yesterday by 2 points. And reminder, tomorrow I'll be chatting with local businessman and entrepreneur Mr. Timothy Fry. But today, very excited to welcome in, for the first time on DrydenWire Live, candidate for Wisconsin's 3rd District Court of Appeals, Judge Greg Gill. Greg, good morning. How are you, sir?
Morning, Ben. I'm doing great, and thanks so much for having me today.
Well, yeah, that was awesome when your campaign reached out, and I want to get into this in a little bit about why nobody pays attention to this, because it was, I think, Adam Jarko had actually asked me about a week ago. I don't know if you know Adam or not. He had said, hey, do you even know who's actually running in the Court of Appeals? It's going to be on your ballot. I'm like, I have no idea. Nope, no clue. So I want to actually get into that. Like, why in the world doesn't that get more love, right? Why aren't people paying more attention to that? So there's a lot to get into, a lot to unpack here, because I actually, for the first time ever, I did about 10 minutes of research and wrote down a few things, which I never really do. So this will be kind of fun. But first, you're the first time on here. There's a lot of people that probably don't know a lot about you, at least in our area. Again, I didn't know a whole lot about you, so I'm so glad that you're on to talk about this. But first, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? What's your story? Tell us a little bit about you.
Great. So I'm born and raised in Wisconsin. Spent a vast majority of my life growing up in the Appleton area. Most Wisconsinites would know that. Outside of Wisconsin, I just say we're about 30 minutes south of Green Bay, and that usually suffices once I give the Packer reference. But born and raised in the state, absolutely, love it here. Had a chance in college to go to the University of Wisconsin. Was part of the track and field team, and that's what brought me there. Great time. And then I'm part of a family that has quite a few lawyers in it. And so I don't know that was the intent when I went to college, but kind of became the default plan, I suppose. Maybe genetically predetermined, but
right.
But ended up doing that, and kind of have done that. Absolutely love it, and that's brought me to the judiciary, and love doing that. But admittedly, when I'm not doing that, like hunting and fishing, and wearing less suit-like material. So
yeah. So you went to school to be a lawyer, right? Because I don't really understand that world, but you don't go to school to be a judge. But right. Was that kind of the goal? Like that's what I want to do, or did you just kind of I wouldn't say fall into that? Nobody really falls into being a judge, but was that always something that you wanted to do, or was it more of just being a lawyer, whether it's on either side?
Yeah, I think I was very happy being a lawyer. The most of my time was in private practice with my family, and that's both rewarding and challenging being a part of a family business. But I loved working with them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you work hard for whatever client is paying the bill. And with being a judge, I like the idea of being able to just sort of help because it's the right thing to do without having to worry about some of those extrinsic issues. And so it took me a while to get to that point. But once I made that decision, and particularly have started doing it, I've never looked back. Absolutely love doing it.
So when did the opportunity, so we're trying to build up here, I think, until your announcement that you were
Sure.
running for Court of Appeals. How long were you a lawyer, and when or what made you decide to run for judge?
Sure. So I had been kind of an interesting career path. I started in the district attorney's office in my county, did that for about a little less than a year and enjoyed that. But I had an opportunity to clerk for a federal judge in Green Bay, Judge Griesbach. And that probably planted the seed for being a judge, but it still wasn't ready. So it gave me an idea of what it was like to be inside of a judicial chamber and get a little behind the scenes. But then after that, went into private practice, and again, very happy, enjoyed doing that. And I think I was probably about 35, 36, which was at that time relatively young to consider pursuing the judiciary. But I talked to some people I respected. They said, there's no perfect time. And so try it, put your name in. At that point in time, it was an appointment process because there was a retirement midterm. Then allows the governor to appoint. And so Governor Walker selected me, and certainly very humbled by that. But at the same token, I probably thought I was a little more of a dark horse type of person. I mean, I didn't have particular connections to Governor Walker, but I think he liked what he saw in terms of my approach to the law and the way that I handled things. And so I got the appointment. And then the way it works in the state is you get appointed and then you're up for election shortly thereafter. And so that's interesting, learning the job and then having to worry about saving the job that you've just started. But ran for that and been elected once again after that. And every day I love it. I mean, it certainly has some challenges, but that's kind of what brought me to where I'm at. And
so
it's been great.
I was going to actually introduce you with what county that you're in. And we had Tom Nelson on about a month ago, and he's running, I think, for Senate. And he had said, because he's from your area,
yes,
and it's the name of the county. And he had said what it was. And I was going to say that this county that you were in, but I can't remember how you pronounce it. So how do you actually say the name of the county that you are currently a circuit court judge?
So it's Outagamie County, and don't feel bad because if you're more than 30 miles away, you'll mispronounce it. Okay. So don't feel bad.
I was going to say Outagamie, so I was close. Outagamie. Yeah. I can't say stupid. I'm sure that's for good reasons. I'm sure it's for something, but come on, man. Do like Clark. That's an easy one to remember. So then you decided, so you've been the judge for how long, the circuit court judge in Outagamie County?
So I've been on the bench 9 years.
Wow.
And in the way that it works in our county is we'd call it a general rotation. So I handle civil law, criminal law, family law. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is put me on or it appointed me to we call it the commercial docket. And it's just kind of a test program to help or to handle cases that are considered complex litigation. So it's certainly appreciate the privilege of being a part of that, but that's just kind of an extra thing. And then in the county, we also have treatment courts. We have a veterans treatment court program, and I'm currently working with the mental health treatment court and love doing that. So got my toes dipped in everywhere.
Yeah. I forgot to bring up for excuse me, live here this morning that sometimes there'll be some questions that are asked, and we will occasionally throw those on. So we have a question here. Where is it from Michael? What is your, so we're getting close to getting up to why you're running for the Court of Appeals, but there's a question. What is your view on the Second Amendment laws? It's
Sure.
a pretty general question, but, give a general answer if you want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I suppose the best answer to say is, I've been born and raised a hunter and teaching responsible, gun handling for a long time. My little boy likes to go in the woods with me. So I certainly appreciate and respect that the Second Amendment and that which flows from it, but also understand that, I, as a Court of Appeals judge, I get my direction from the Constitution. I get my direction from the Supreme Court of the United States, the Supreme Court of the state of Wisconsin. And so while I do get involved in kind of making the decisions, it's also important to know I have to put some of my personal sentiments aside because I have to apply the law as written by the courts above and the legislature and things. So I certainly respect the Second Amendment, but also understand that, as it relates to the question, even if I were to say, well, I just think everyone should have guns and there should be no restrictions. I'm still bound to follow the law. And that's one of the, I suppose, neat things about the law is the way I look at it is my job is not to create new law. That's the job of the legislature, or to reinvent things based on personal sentiments. And that's regardless of what side of the aisle one might fall on. I have to apply the law as it's written and intended. Now, I'll also say I've read decisions on the Second Amendment. Justice Scalia's written decisions on that, and he's articulated very well, sort of the rights that are associated with that. And so it kind of a long answer, but that's.
No, that's perfectly fine. I think it was needed. And actually, excuse me, we have a couple more questions from Jonathan Wickman. Good morning, John. And Romaine, of course, or he had next time. But I want to get to, we're up to you decided to run for Court of Appeals. When did you decide to do this? And then when did you announce?
Sure. So I started probably the impetus started this past summer, and I received a call from a friend of mine and a judge that I respect greatly, Judge Lisa Stark, and she's currently a judge on the 3rd District Court of Appeals. And she had told me that Judge Mark Seidel was going to be retiring, and knew that I was interested in sort of the intellectual side of the Court of Appeals. So she reached out just to let me know that was going to be an opening, and kind of told me a little bit more about the position. And I'll be honest, my first reaction was, I like my little piece of the world in Outagamie County. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm making a difference, sort of one life at a time. And we talked a bit, but again, kind of felt comfortable with where I was at. And then a little while later, Judge Roos, Tom Roos, who's also on the 3rd District Court of Appeals, so he's the second judge. There's 3 judges in the district. Tom reached out to me, and we had a little bit more in-depth conversation about the court and what it entailed. And it kind of started to get the wheels turning a little bit. And, of course, from there, you pray and you talk to your family and go, is this something we want to do? Is this right for us? And ultimately came to the conclusion that this would be good not only for our family, but good in terms of how I can contribute to the state. And, I began to realize that on the Court of Appeals, you can affect a lot of lives as opposed to sort of one at a time, and continue to share, the law with people and educate people. So all of a sudden that started becoming more and more appealing. And I think it was probably, in fact, I was coming back from a hunting trip that I think I formally told Judge Roos, I'm going to do this, and I'm in. And
when was this?
Probably about mid-October. It was mid-October, maybe a little bit earlier. And, from there, you kind of go from 0 to 100 pretty quickly, because at that time, it's still only 5-6 months away. So you kind of ramp things up pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I have kind of just a little bit of a flow here, and we're jumping ahead, but I want to make sure that I bring this up. This is a question from Jonathan Wickman, because that is something that I wanted to talk to you about today. Jonathan Wickman was also just on our show recently. He's running for governor in Wisconsin, and the question is, how does Greg think the Supreme Court will rule today on the mandates?
I'm gonna be. I've got my guess, but I haven't read enough of the briefs on it, and so I think it'd probably be ill of me to guess, because I don't know all the legal arguments, and it would have been nice to probably have the decision sooner than later, whatever way it's going to go. But I'll also say that I'm excited to read it, because I like to see where the different perspectives come from. I'd love it if it were a 7-0 decision and they all agreed, but history is not really showing that to be the case too often.
All right. Well, you text me who you think or what's going to happen, and I'll text you what I think is going to happen. So when you do actually, I'm assuming you pay attention to this, all of these things over the last 13 months. When you sit back and look at these things, is it one of those, man, what are they doing? So some of these decisions have already been made. And for some reason, and if you want to get in it, you can, it's turned very political. You're saying you just kind of look at the law. I was reading something from you on, I think it was WPR yesterday, the day before. Hold on, I had it written down that your judicial philosophy, which actually remained, I think it just brought up right here, is textualism. Yeah, I have no idea what that means. So maybe before we get into the your views on those certain things, what is textualism?
So first of all, Ben, you're in good company because probably 95% of the world would have no idea what that means. But once I explain it, hopefully it's much clearer. So really what textualism says is that the function of a judge is to look at the plain meaning of the law. And so if the legislature has used the word shall in a piece of legislature, I don't have discretion on that. So I have to follow what that says, and shall means mandatory language. And basically, if there's a question, my belief is to look backwards at what the intent was at the time of writing, because that can be determined. We can determine what somebody meant at the time it was written, whether you look at legislative history, whether you look at the context at the time. And I think that's the only way to provide certainty, because if I, by way of example, make my decisions based on political sentiment or popular views of the day, the law can always change because views in society change. And so if there's going to be change, that should be the job of the legislature. And so to give kind of a concrete example, there's laws in Wisconsin that have, we'd call them mandatory minimums. So if you commit a crime, the legislature says you have to go to prison for 3 years. Now, I don't like mandatory minimums because I think as a judge, I should be able to look at each case and each case individually, and maybe I exceed the minimum, or maybe I think it's important to do something less. But the legislature has written the language the way that they've written it, and so I respect that. So when it says, Judge, you shall sentence someone to 3 years in prison, that's what I have to do. And I have to put those political or personal sentiments aside and follow the legislature on that. And so that's by and large what textualism means. And I also believe that if, as a judge, I should not be unilaterally expanding the laws. If there's going to be a wholesale change to the law, that should come through the legislature, because that's what they were elected to do. So it shouldn't be one judge usurping the function of an entire elected body.
All right, so this is my, a lot of these questions are going to be like 8th grade level, right? Because that's about my level of knowledge about these things. But I'm sorry, I just assumed, that's my fault, all judges would feel that way, right? I mean, of course, you look at the law and you shouldn't bring in other things, and certainly you have to look at each scenario, and there's some interpretation of certain things, and maybe there's a little bit of gray area. But I don't know, doesn't everybody do that?
I think a lot of people start there, and I'll say, I've been lucky to know a lot of judges, and I think at their core, all good people, all want to do the right thing. But I think in some instances, there are judges that truly respect the idea that all changes should come through the legislature or the elected process. I think there are other views that say, you know what, legislative enactments may take a long time, and so we should help facilitate the process by helping with social change. Sure. And so I understand the thought process. I don't agree with it, because I think that there's 3 branches of government for a reason. And we have, whether we like it or not, we have to respect that process.
So obviously this isn't a partisan race, but if I asked you right now, talking about the Supreme Court, what is there? Is there 7 or is it 9?
7 on our
seven. So we have 7 of them. And if I ask you right now, which are conservative and which are liberal, you'd probably be able to tell me. So is that something where it's, yeah, I don't talk about that. When you run for a judgeship, you never talk about that. Or is that something you can kind of say, I'm just saying, I am more conservative or I am more liberal? Or is that something that you just don't really discuss?
I talk about it in the sense of judicial philosophy. So when you say like textualism, or we say typically that's considered a judicially conservative philosophy, but that should not be meant to suggest that that's exclusive to Republicans or Democrats. I know plenty of judges that would be politically considered more Democratic than not, but they have a similar judicial philosophy to mine, where they say we need to respect the law and the Constitution, just as I'm sure that there are what you would consider more Republican politically inclined judges that say, you know what, I can still help effectuate social change. So I think you get the two terms, activist judge and conservative judge. And I think because so much, to your point, is gotten sort of political, it's implied that it's a left versus right or a Republican versus Democrat, but I don't think that's necessarily true in a judicial sense. I think you can have a conservative judicial thinking Democrat leaning judge, and you can have an activist, potentially Republican leaning judge, if that makes sense.
It does. I just don't think it's very often.
Just
my personal opinion.
No, I think that's probably true.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly a lot of the people who are endorsing you or that are donating to you must think that you are more conservative. Would it be fair to say that they would believe they would put you in that category of conservatism?
Yeah, I think, and part of the problem is, I think, yes, to answer your question is right. I mean, certainly my judicial philosophy is very conservative, right, in terms of a textualist approach. And, certainly, as you may have seen, I mean, I'm endorsed by Wisconsin Right to Life and Pro-Life Wisconsin, and those would be typically more of a conservative type of viewpoint in organization. But like a lot of us, I'm sure I have complexities that people might say, well, he's a more philosophically conservative, but he might also say, treatment courts. That might be a more liberal thinking idea. And so they go, well, it always frustrates me when we try to pigeonhole people into one category or the another, because people are complex. And so while I certainly would not shy away from somebody who says, boy, you have some conservative ideology, I also wouldn't say that precludes me from understanding the other side, or even saying, you know what, I think I agree with some of those ideas.
And of the conservatives that I know, the question is, the least that I have received, is Judge Gill more of a Hagedorn conservative or more of a Rebecca Bradley conservative? And that's, I think, what some people are trying to figure out.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I like to think, I would say neither, because there are times when I've read decisions, even from someone who I may not agree with philosophically, and I'll love their decision from the standpoint of, I disagree with the outcome, but the way you wrote that articulated how you got the wrong answer. And so as long as I can follow a decision from point A to point B and there's no gaps, then I can at least critique it. But where I get frustrated is when you go from point A, which is the starting point in a decision, and all of a sudden you get to the conclusion and you have no idea how they got there. That's what frustrates me, because how can you and I say we agree with an opinion or disagree with an opinion if we have no idea how they got there? Because you can have an opinion that has the correct conclusion but flawed logic, or you can have one that has absolutely flawed logic in getting there but reaches the correct conclusion somehow.
All right, that I'm gonna have to go back and listen to what you said again, because that's gonna fester, because that's brilliant. I need to think about that a little bit more. Yeah, so I don't want people just sitting here watching me thinking. It's not good. It doesn't take me very long to get through anything anyway. Hey, real quick, here's kind of a one-off thing. A lot of cancel culture stuff going around right now. What are your overall thoughts about cancel culture? And have you experienced any of that stuff during your campaign?
I've been pretty fortunate, I think, anytime there's a restriction, I get concerned because, the world is already, and Ben, this is actually a great experience because you and I are having more than a 2-minute soundbite to try to explain everything in my life.
Yeah.
But, we're already in such a society where everything's cut down to sound bites. And then when you limit it even further, if our point is to be educated, how do we help facilitate that if we're, before the message even gets out, regulating it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. What is the most frequently asked question that you get from voters? Just Joe Blow on the street, right? I'm running. What's the most common one that you get?
Probably the question about my judicial philosophy, and most people, and it's interesting because I certainly don't poll people and say, well, did you vote Democrat in the last election or did you vote Republican? But I assume I've got a blend of people that I've encountered. I certainly hope so. And regardless, I find by and large, people say we want judges that follow the law. Yeah. And that's the question that I get most often.
What about the most frequently asked question you get from media?
Media. That's a good question.
Yes. I get one of those a show.
Yeah. God, you got me stumped. All of a sudden, I'm quiet.
Well, you think about that one. In the meantime, I got to read this from Tracy Yackel. Here's a question. In your opinion, is the decision to release the Supreme Court decision right before an election political?
That's a great question because I've thought personally, and I didn't. This issue came before the Supreme Court in December, if I recall correctly. They'd issued a decision on the safer at home order. Literally within weeks. They heard arguments. They had a decision within weeks. They then heard this argument. I think it was in December, and here we are 4 months later. And again, without reading the briefs, I thought, why couldn't this decision be issued just as quickly as the safer at home order? I hope it's not political, but it kind of behooves me on why it took so long. And again, there may have been a lot behind the scenes that went on, but when you see one complex decision really fast tracked and you see another, complex decision kind of get slowed down and bogged down, you kind of wonder if there are other reasons why it happens. And I'm not suggesting there are or aren't, but at least you wonder.
Yeah, you totally are. Okay, I will say that I am then. Yeah, because unfortunately, right, so you've been, and you're still a citizen, now you have a little more insight, or obviously being a lawyer and a judge, you've watched everything that's happened over the last 13 months. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get into the political part of it, but when you see what Evers and the DHS, the orders, the mask mandates, the emergency order, the extensions, and then another, and then the Supreme Court, what they decide, and then the Court of Appeals, and this whole process. Do you sit back and just look and just like, what are you doing? Like, what? This isn't the way we're supposed to be doing it. If you could wave your magic wand, what would this have looked like over these last 13 months? How should we have done that?
Well, it's I think to the issue at hand on this decision, I look at it as if this decision had been issued 2-3 months ago. It couldn't go back 13 months, but everything could have been expedited. Two things is, I think, one, it then forces the parties and I mean that in a generic sense, not in a political sense, but it forces people to kind of figure out, how do we find the happy medium and work together to come to a solution? Because the people, and without saying whether I agree or disagree, the people that have said, we need to get our economy back in order, there's some merit to that argument. The people that say we're concerned about health, there's some merit to that. Now, I don't know enough of the nuances. I haven't studied it, but right now it seems to become a political embattlement where the parties have, again, generically, have kind of gotten so entrenched in their position that we've gotten bogged down by all of these side issues. And it would have been nice to say, you know what, let's all work together to find a win-win solution, because up to this point, it seems that it's been a win-lose. And now we're waiting on the Supreme Court to basically say, well, guess who wins and guess who loses?
I was speaking with, actually, it reminded me when Tracy Yackel had commented, I was speaking with Judge John Yackel recently, because he's going to be coming on for a show. He comes on, I don't know, once or twice a year, I think end of April. And we just had a quick chat. It was about how important it is, the longer he does that job, to really, I mean, like any job, just kind of the better that you get and how important that is. And I don't know anything about your opponent. Believe it or not, I don't even know what the person's name is, because, again, they didn't ask to come on. I don't know who it is. I don't know anything about him or her, actually. No, I do know it is a person, because when I was reading that WPR story, it was just a name I didn't know how to pronounce it. I don't know what his experience is, but you have had experience as a trial lawyer, as a judge in a circuit court. How valuable do you believe that is when looking at going for a court of appeals position?
Sure. And two things. I mean, one, I've tried as best I can to keep this campaign focused on my credentials. And, I don't, as an aside, I don't think there's a lot of, I think we've become too negative in terms of telling me what the other guy didn't do and not enough about telling what we are. So I've made a conscious point to say, here are my credentials. Sure. And so, I am, having been on the bench for 9 years, I'm a better judge today than I was 9 years ago. And the Court of Appeals, by and large, reviews what took place at the trial level. And so having had the experience of what it's like to make decisions on the bench with short notice, or having to make an evidentiary decision, those are all situations that I've been through. And so I think it helps me better understand sort of the facts of which I'm going to be evaluating. And, it's similar to, if you look at, take a college football coach, for example. By and large, a vast majority of your college football coaches played football or coached at lower ranks. And that, they have the experience which says, now I'm able to better understand things at a different level. And I think the same holds true in the Court of Appeals. Having been there, having experienced it, that will help me better address the issues that I need to address when reviewing the work of a trial judge.
Well, I'm the exception to that, because I think I'm worse now doing these than I was, 5.5 years ago. So I don't know. I just keep getting worse and worse. So if Greg Gill could tell, Greg Gill today, March 31st, 2021, could tell Greg Gill October 1st, 2020, something that, boy, dude, you need to know this. What advice would you have given yourself from 6 months ago, 5 months ago?
I would have said the district is a lot larger than you realized, and you put a lot more miles on your car than you thought.
It's huge. By the way, we didn't even talk about that. It's like 30, I don't know how many, like 32, 35 out of the 72 counties. That's ridiculous.
Yes, it's about half the state. And so for those who may not be as familiar, if you take Highway 29, which runs through Wausau and kind of dissects the state, everything north of Highway 29 is in the district. And then it also includes Eau Claire County and Buffalo County, Pepin, Florence on the eastern side or western side, and then Outagamie County, Brown County, Kewaunee on the west or eastern side. And I love where I live. I've grown up in this community, love the people, but it would have been nice for this campaign perhaps to have lived a little more centrally located within the district.
Yeah, I suppose. By the way, Adam Jarko, I think his court strikes down emergency order. That's his vote. And by the way, I agree with you, Adam. I think that's what's going to happen. It's not necessarily what I want or what I don't. I don't care. I just, it's like watching, using a sports reference, a basketball game. I like to pick who I think is going to win. I couldn't care less if they won or lost. It's just I like to pick. And I don't know. I agree with Adam. I think that's what's going to happen. So, but you can't say, so you just let me know later.
I'll let you know later.
Yep. What's been your? So we're already over our time. It's been so great talking to you, but I don't know. Let's talk a little. What have you enjoyed the most about doing running for this, and what have you? Man, this part really just sucks doing this campaign because of this.
Yeah, it's I've really loved getting to meet people and to travel to parts of the state that I wouldn't otherwise normally frequent.
Hold on, we're going to interrupt you. I'm sorry. Adam said it did happen. Opinion is out.
All right. And I will, now that it's out, I'll tell you that's how I would have guessed.
Okay. All right.
But I'm excited to now go read the decision and see how they arrived at that. So
let's wrap this up so we can go read. I'm kidding. So I'm sorry, please. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want that was awesome. So please continue.
So the best part is getting to meet people and visit parts of the state that you don't otherwise go to. Conversely, it's also the worst part because I'm trying to explain who I am in 2-minute sound bites. And we talked about that. And first, I like learning more about people than I like telling about myself. And second, when I tell about myself, it's probably more of a boring novel than a
I don't know. I've enjoyed it. I just want to see what the ruling was here real quick, if I can find it real fast. No, it's going to take me too long. Not eligible. All right. So the thing, though, that you just really... sorry, my train of thought is on something else right now. What's next for you? You have an election on Tuesday, of course. What's the message that you want to tell everyone that either don't know much about you or do know something about you, but man, I got a few days left here before the election, and I want to make sure you know this. What is this?
So I think the biggest message for me is that, I understand that come election day, there is a certain percentage that's going to vote for me and a certain percentage that's going to vote for the other person running. And to me, that is the only day in which percentages matter, because after that, if I'm blessed and I become the next judge on the Court of Appeals, I'm going to make my decisions fairly and evenly. I'm going to become a judge that I hope all citizens are proud to say he's serving us and is on the bench. And I'll do that with honor and integrity, so long as the citizens want to keep me there.
And what do you do when you're not, judging it up?
It's funny because somehow I've been able to avoid this a vast majority of the campaign. There's not been any pictures of me playing in my band, but I play very poorly bass in a band with one of my best friends who's a lawyer and some other friends. We do that, and kind of a release from our real day, but love spending time with my family and hunting and fishing. And I enjoy my work attire, but I'll be honest, I like my flannels and my camouflage and my jeans and t-shirts. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
All right. I just thought of one more thing. I think I keep bringing up Judge Jacob, but he was on and he brought this word up and I'd never heard of it before. You probably have, of course. It's called Robeitis. Have you heard of that?
Or black robe disease, as some people call it.
Sure. So, have you seen that? Is that a real thing?
It's funny. I think some people get the idea that, and I just thought of this recently. There's a reason I'm called a public servant, because I'm a servant to the public. But some people like to invert those words once they become elected, and there's a servant public. And they think that now I've been elevated above the public. And, I put Judge Greg Gill on here in my introduction, but I'll be honest, Ben, if I'm not in my robe and I'm not on the bench and you're not a litigant, call me Greg. Yeah. I mean, I'm no different than anybody else. And I try to never forget that. I make mistakes every day just as anybody else does.
Oh, no, I make a lot more. Trust me. Greg, thanks for taking the time to obviously come on and chat with us. We could just talk forever. This has been great. And when you win, I don't know if that's even something legally you can do, but come back on and tell us your experience throughout this whole thing in a few months. Just keep us in mind. Prayers to you and your family. Best wishes to you on Tuesday. Thanks so much, Greg. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ben. It's been absolutely wonderful. And now I got to get and read this decision. I'm hoping for a 7-0 decision, but it's probably a 4-3.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not 7. I would agree with you on that one, too. I wouldn't take that bet over under 4. Special thank you to our guest today, Circuit Court Judge and candidate for Wisconsin's 3rd District Court of Appeals, Judge Greg Gill. And thank all of you for watching. Until next time, stay safe, make a difference in someone's life today, stay positive, and as always, have a blessed day.